Our scripture reading this morning will be coming from Matthew chapter 5. If you want to put a finger in that in your pew Bible, you can do that. But let me ask, first of all, is there anyone who recognizes this building? You recognize the city, of course, New York, and the building is the Rockefeller Center. Those of you who have visited the Rockefeller Center know that on the first floor of the building you find this extensive series of murals. And here are a couple of the 30 or so murals painted on walls, ceilings, pillars. They depict man's technological progress in mastering nature. And so you have these kind of huge, muscular, tawny images of humankind prying with lever and hammering with mallets and chisels and turning the great wheels of industry and commerce. And amid these many representations of mankind's glorious achievements stands one mural which at first glance seems very much out of place. It's a representation of Christ teaching on the Mount. Should be coming up next. There we go. The heroic hero in white there on the right-hand side in the background. His hands are outstretched in blessing, and he's addressing this multitude of people of every race and class and condition, the poor, the sick, maimed, rich, who are standing there or sitting on the slopes of the hill there and at the foot of the mountain. Some are listening intently. Others are talking with their companions or kind of looking away in other directions, paying no attention at all. And beneath and alongside the mural is this written legend: man's ultimate destiny depends not on whether he can learn new lessons or makes new discoveries and conquests, but on his acceptance of the lesson taught to him close on to 2,000 years ago. It's an arresting statement in that context. That's because the Sermon on the Mount is arguably the most arresting passage in the New Testament. This morning we're going to take a brief look at the very beginning of that sermon, which is found in Matthew 5, 1 through 12. Jesus has just begun to choose his disciples. He summons Peter and Andrew, James and John. They promptly obey. They abandon their nets, their boats, even their father, to follow Jesus. They are practical men, called from this practical process of fishing to make a living to now set about on this strange and uncharted mission. Follow me, Jesus says. And they did. And never one to demand blind faith, Jesus takes them away and he begins to teach them the meaning of discipleship, the meaning of following in Jesus' way, the way of God's kingdom. He begins his training of those who would follow him with a sermon, which begins with a series of revolutionary statements known as the Beatitudes, each containing a promise and a challenge, each taking the accepted standards of that day and ours and turning them upside down. Listen to Jesus preach. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is the word of the Lord. Let me start off directly this morning. Most of us have been taught to navigate life's challenges through power and strength and accomplishment and acquisition. We work to acquire some level of wealth so that we can have what we want. We seek power so we can leverage what we want. We argue to be right so we can get our way. We compete to win so we'll be respected and admired. We want to be beautiful, handsome, good-looking so we'll be liked and desired. Admit it or not, these are the basic motivations and strategies we all use to make our way through life. And these strategies, these attitudes, of course, fill our headline news, our Twitter feeds, magazine articles, Facebook news, tabloid pictures, television, our own lives. They find their origin in the idea that we're to be self-made men and women, that we're to build up ourselves and make a life. After all, you have to look out for number one, because if you don't, no one else will. At least that's what most of us have been told. Forever and ever. That seems to have been the myth with a capital M by which we all have lived. And Jesus' life, and particularly his teaching here in the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, fly in the face of that myth, especially these Beatitudes. Jesus offers a very different way of navigating life. Life can be navigated in a way that is deeply satisfying and successful, but it's not through power or strength or accomplishment or acquisition. The way forward is not the way we've always done it. It's not enough for us as believers and followers of Jesus to simply use these methods, to try and do good, to make over our little piece of the world or life. It's not enough to try to reform a political or economic system using the same strategies humans have always used. Navigating life is not about overcoming circumstances or other people. It's about overcoming the greatest obstacle of all, ourselves. If you want to know what it looks like to overcome yourself, to live this different lifestyle, look at the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn, Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. This is how we Christians navigate life. This is how to meet the challenges, the uncertainties, the difficulties of life. This is what we are to be teaching our children and our grandchildren. They are counterintuitive for sure. But a lifetime of absorbing the Beatitudes into our hearts and living day after day, year after year, is how we overcome ourselves and what passes for the real world. And this hardened resignation to the way things are. Now, as we hear Jesus' words here, as we consider the Beatitudes, it's easy to look at ourselves and say, this isn't me. Nor is it this world I live in. It's not even my church. Yet the Beatitudes are a description of reality. Each one of them is written in the indicative mood, not the imperative. Blessed are, blessed are, blessed are, right now. They are description, not prescription. They're not another 10 commandments. But if the Beatitudes are a description of reality, what world do they describe? Blessed are the meek, said Jesus. Hey, you and I know in our world the meek don't get the land. They get left holding worthless beads. Blessed are the merciful, Jesus says. But the merciful usually get taken advantage of again, don't they? Blessed are those who mourn, says Jesus. But in our world, mourning may be tolerated for a while, but soon enough you're going to be asked to pull it together and move on. Please. Blessed are the pure in heart, says Jesus. But in our world, such people are dismissed as hopelessly naive. Blessed are the peacemakers. But in our world, those who pursue peace risk having their patriotism called into question, don't they? And dare we ask, which of these blessings our national leaders refer to when they insist that God bless America? To none of these. Because our national creed is one of optimism, not mourning. Self-confidence, not poverty of spirit. And abundance, not hunger and thirst of any kind. We live by beatitudes of a whole other sort, don't we? In today's world, Jesus' beatitudes sound a lot like weakness and foolishness. That's what they've sounded like in every age. That's because they're not about building up or accomplishing or acquiring. They're about letting go, surrendering, living with a vulnerable and an open heart to life. To those being saved, it is the power of God, God's reality, the reality where it is foolish, and where foolishness shames the wise, and what is weak shames the strong. The Beatitudes are nothing less than the way of the cross, the heart of the sacrament that we take into our lives, into our bodies this morning. in the trauma and the setbacks of life, we discover we can't do life by ourselves. And as we admit our need of God, we find purity of heart. The arrogance of self-sufficiency gives way to meekness, strength under harness. We realize that all we are and have is from God, and we begin to know ourselves as poor in spirit. Our own misfortunes awaken and connect us to the pain of the world for which we cannot help but mourn. Do you not mourn for our world? We think less about ourselves and become merciful to others. We have nowhere else to go, and so we turn our gaze back to God. And the longer we gaze at God, the more we hunger and thirst for things to be made right, righteousness, for God's life. And we become peacemakers, reconciling ourselves to God and our neighbor. This is the life for which Christ's disciples are willing to be persecuted. A life of righteousness, right relationships. The life for which Christ died and rose again. So what does this all add up to? Well, the Beatitudes are not so much about specific actions, direct commands that we're to do or not do, but how we do and how we act. Our attitudes, our being, and our relationships. To live these blessings, these Beatitudes, is to live a life of reckless, exuberant, self-abandonment to God and to neighbor. That's called love. And the only reason we can do that is because we know and we trust ourselves to have already been blessed by God. We live the Beatitudes empowered and as a response to God's blessing, God's grace, God's love, God's compassion. It is the way of God's Son, Jesus Christ. It is not only the way forward through this life, but it points us to the life to come, to the kingdom come in all its fullness. May the Lord make it our way as well. Thanks be to God for his incredible gift to us in Jesus